one day when we're back allowed to be on the road again, it'll be awesome.
Great. What we're going to do, this is very informal. I was thinking we can chat about tempo runs, and you can interrupt as you please as well. It's not a long talk and then question session. I think most of you by now have probably done tempo runs. Have you not done tempo runs? I think you've all done them by now. The tempo runs, if there had to be one session that coaches would agree on as being the key session, if you could do one quality session in a week, only one, it would be your tempo run, because that's a session that will give you the biggest bang for your buck. And the reason I say that is you'll hear about things like your VO2 max tests, etc., etc. But the actual difference between runners that can maintain a race pace over a 10K or a 21K or a marathon is essentially their ability to hold what we call the lactate threshold to train at that pace, which is your tempo pace. So it's a session that is not too fast, not too slow, and it corresponds to what we call the lactate threshold that I'll talk about now. The way we do it, it varies again. There's no one rule fits all. Generally speaking, you're looking in terms of your pace from 15K race pace to about 21K race pace. It will depend on the runner. You could think a less well-trained runner cannot maintain that intensity for 21Ks, but they might for 15. But it's roughly around about that speed. It's what we call comfortably hard. With this, you can, if you use a breathing test, you're breathing quite hard. But you can talk, but you don't really want to. But you are in control. It's one of my favorite runs because you're actually running fast, but you're not maxed out. So another way of calling it, we think of it as fast cruising. It's a nice way of thinking of it. Ideally, do these sort of runs where you can on flattish to slightly undulating routes. If you do it on a very hilly route, you can slow down on the uphill, keep the same intensity, and that's fine. The problem is when you hit a steep downhill. To stay at that same effort, you'd actually have to run so fast you'd crash your legs. You wouldn't be able to get your heart rate actually up on the downhill. So you want to actually, in that time frame, let's say you're doing 20 minutes or 30 minutes tempo run, you want to try to keep your heart rate in that zone for all the time, if possible. It's another reason why I don't let my runners do it on a trail, for instance. Very hard to run smoothly and fast, and you want to practice running with rhythm as well. Now, you probably heard, maybe some of you heard, I'm sure you have. Any of you are older than 40 will have heard about lactic acid and saying that it's the reason for our sore legs. Any hands up here, guys? Anyone? Debbie has, yeah, Dee has, Rita has, Robert has. Okay, Eileen has. So, it's a load of crap. It's been completely disproved. The sad thing, of course, is in the 80s and the early 90s, when I was training at my max, I'm talking 180 to 200 Ks a week for comrades. My max mileage, by the way, I hate to say this, Debbie went and passed it running around the bloody garden last week. My max week was 197, so when she heard that, she went to 200. There are names for people like you, Debbie. So what we thought was lactic acid you need to run the next day to get it out of your system. So we'd have this crazy situation. My legs would be trashed after a marathon or an ultra. And then I go staggering down the street on my wooden legs the next day because I think I'm doing them good. And we did this for 10, 20 years. Now, the actual damage to your legs is not the lactic acid. It's actually muscle damage. And if you think about it, your lactate threshold, which we'll talk about now, is at a fairly high speed. So any race over 21 Ks, you're running slower than lactate threshold. So you cannot have lactate in your legs in any case. It's muscle damage. And furthermore, lactate that you do get in your legs disperses within an hour. Okay, so lactate itself, it's actually part of the, what we call it, the glycolysis system. It's basically, to keep it simple, it's burning glycogen, burning sugar, carbs, is part of the energy production. So what you're doing is when you run, the higher the intensity you run, the more lactate you produce. And the lactate is used as part of the fuel system. So if you're running at 21K race, but at high intensity, 15 to 21K, you are virtually exclusively running on carbs. You're not burning fat. And in that process, as you get faster and faster, you're using more and more lactate. Okay, so lactate's a good thing. It's part of the glycolysis process. But what does happen, what is interesting, at a certain heart rate, effort, at around about 85 to 95% of your max VO2, if you know what that is, your heart rate starts to plateau. And then they said, well, that is your lactate threshold point. And you can do certain training to lift that point. So what we have this funny sort of situation. Remember, you can chip in any time, guy. We have the funny situation where the lactate threshold does not exist. It does not exist. But because this thing happens visually at a certain level, and training at that level helps to push it up, so that you can run faster, maintain a faster pace, we still call it a lactate threshold. But actually, it's a misnomer. It does not exist. All right. Lactate itself cannot produce sore legs the next day or any of that. Now, the funny thing about lactate threshold as well is in your training, you at that point, your body does start to produce lactic acid. And your body, it gets quite complicated. And I went back to Tim Noakes now, and I'm not a sports scientist. On the sort of coaches like me, we understand why. We don't always understand the how. Okay, so I read Noakes, and Noakes says it's been disproved, but you can still use it for this and this reason. I don't have to understand all the sums that he does. I'm not a scientist. But basically, at that sort of level, it starts to get acidic. Now, you've probably heard of acidic muscles making your muscles sore. I think some of you might have had. Some of you take alkaline supplements. That does happen, okay? And as it does that, you're hitting your lactate threshold. Your body, what it does is to buffer this lactic acid, to counteract it. It pushes protons into your bloodstream, which means there's a high level of lactate. So all of a sudden in your bloodstream, you're getting a high level of lactate when you measure it, mmol. And that point at which it suddenly starts to get high, when your body's trying to fight lactic acid, is actually what we call lactate threshold. Okay. So in that, from that point of view, it does exist. And the important thing for us is not really the why it exists, is how we can run better using this. And we can do that basically by training at what we call the lactate threshold. Okay. Now, some of you, I don't know, but some of you may have heard of the Conconi test. See any bright guys here. Okay. Go and Google it. Very, very, very fascinating. It's become quite the rage. I had so many runners in last year saying, please, coach, you've got to do the Conconi test and we've got to work on Conconi.
Just say the name again slowly. The what test?
Conconi test.
Conconi.
C-O-N-C-O-N-I. And once again, I say it's crap. Okay. Very interesting, very bright guy. A coach in the early 80s, Italian chap at the University of Ferrara. And what he was doing was experimenting with his athletes, using things eventually like blood doping, EPO, which some of you have heard about. And guess who was actually paying for all of this? The Italian Olympic National Committee and the International Olympic Committee was paying for it, not realizing he was supposedly doing studies on how to combat it. And what he was doing, he was using the funding to buy the products and he was selling it to the predominantly cyclists. And one of his colleagues that then picked this up from him was, some of you guys heard of Michele Ferrari. He's the chap who was Lance Armstrong's man, providing him with the doping. So you can see how it all worked. So under this facade of respectability, of fighting all of this, he was actually supplying the cyclists and using the money that was provided with for it. Fascinating story if you ever want to go and read it. It all came out when the Lance Armstrong stuff went to court. The problem with the Conconi test, though, is it's similar to the lactate threshold. You can use this if you're ever in a pub with the runners at a club time trial. You're going to look good. The point is, he also noticed at a certain level your heart rate plateaus. So he calls it the heart rate inflection point. And he said, well, that must be the point at which people will, that's your lactate threshold. So he devised a test, basically you run hard, you can test for it, and you're going to find this test, I think, on some running watches. That's why I'm mentioning it. and then you can do your training according to this level. The problem with it, Tim Noakes and a lot of the other sports scientists have trashed this, is the point is that your heart does have an inflection point where it plateaus, but it's higher than your lactate threshold. So it means that if you do this Conconi system, you'd be training too hard. You'd basically be running too fast and get injured. Okay, to try and keep it simple. But it's very fascinating. I just love it. I mean, everybody's onto this Conconi thing, not realizing he was a guy behind a lot of the EPO and stuff like that. Let's go on to any questions, and we can also wander around and chat about your own training. Predominantly tempo runs. We'll try and do a different subject every week. Any guys?
I just got a question. Are there any tests you do recommend?
For any?
Are there any types of tests that you do recommend?
It's a good question, Amy. You can do a lactate threshold test. It was ghastly. I did my VO2 max and lactate threshold at Ticky's High Sports Center back in 1992. Very high VO2, very high lactate threshold, as you can imagine. I was young and I was fit and I had some talent. The VO2, again, you're going to get, first let me just say something. A watch cannot predict your VO2. All right. Again, it's a very nice gimmick on your watch. It might show increases in how you're running you're running at a higher level with a lower heart rate. So you're getting fitter. But I cannot see how a watch can predict your VO2. So what is VO2? Anybody know? I have a go. Rita, put in the sound. Let's hear.
Apparently, it's how quickly your body can take oxygen and convert it back into energy. In a nutshell, that's what I was told.
Yeah, correct. And also how efficient you use it, not just how much oxygen you get in. It's like a car. You might have a car that has a massive engine, but it's very inefficient. It burns a lot of fuel. So you want to also be very efficient. Now, the problem is with the high VO2, they said theoretically, I'm talking back in the 80s, 90s. In fact, I got Noakes' first 4 law of runnings, which is very nice because you can actually see how his thinking changed each time and new stuff came up. And Noakes is one of those guys, he's never afraid to say, hey, I was wrong and come back with another idea. So back then, your elite level, we're talking world class, was 69.7. Guess who's at 69.7 hours? That's your bottom line. But then it went all the way up into the 80s. Okay. Now, they got very excited back then when they tested me. They wanted to find sponsors in the running circles because they said I was grossly overweight at that point because I was in winter training. So at that point, my body fat was 16.7. So I looked quite good. My face is almost round. And they said, my God, if you go down to just 10%, your VO2 goes up to 74.5. That means my comrades time would then be a 5:34. Basic same VO2 as Fordyce, to give you an idea. So they got very excited. They said, if I just bring my weight down, and the reason they say weight is you measure your VO2, again, in how much mmol. Hi, Velani, what got a question? Oh, superb. You measure it in terms of oxygen per kilogram. So one of the reasons we run better when we lose weight is per kilogram we have more oxygen. It makes sense, eh? And you can immediately see it when you put on weight. Hi, Rita.
I also did when I started running a run for Harmony, which is Nick Bester's club, and
That's right.
they needed some athletes to do tests at Tucky's as well, and so I volunteered in 2003. So we went every single day. We had to go and draw blood, and one time in one arm, the other day in the other arm. So they did my VO2 max with the blood tests, and then they were testing the Tralmule product at the time. Can I take those tests as quite accurate? Obviously, it changes with time. You get older, you get younger.
What happens is, sorry, carry on, Rita.
I'm good.
I've lost
Thank
you.
You.
Okay, so what happens is to measure VO2, you run on a treadmill to exhaustion, wearing a mask, because they need to measure the amount of oxygen that you're taking in. And while you run, they take blood out of your ear continually. It's horrendous, believe me. I did a lactate threshold test. I'll tell you about that now. Before that, I did 4 mile repeats, where they took blood out of my ear at the end of each one at a very high intensity. Zap me onto the treadmill. You basically run until you fall. And what they're doing is they're increasing the speed on the treadmill. And I can remember vividly, I was on 22 kilometers an hour when I collapsed eventually. And I literally could not go a step on. So I don't even want to do it again in my lifetime. But a more important test, really. So just drawing blood will not give you your VO2. Okay.
Okay, that's what I.
What you can do is when they do a lactate threshold test, and it may have changed. I remember I did mine in 92. But basically, they would make me run mile repeats, and then they would draw blood to check the lactic acid and the levels in my blood. So again, it's not an easy thing, but I would say of the two, that's a more relevant test. The reason that if you look at the VO2s, you can have guys like world-class Olympic marathons with 69.7 VO2, others with 80, but they run the same marathon time. And one would think it doesn't make sense. But it depends also on things such as your running economy, how efficiently you use the fuel, and a whole lot of other things. So all they're saying is if you have a high VO2, it puts you into that elite category, but it doesn't mean you're going to run well. If you have a low VO2, you're not going to be in that high elite category anyway, unless you're perhaps doing an extreme endurance event where you don't need to run at a high level of a high VO2 max. Okay, so there are some other strengths tests that one can do. Some of the things that are interesting that we didn't look at back then. Maybe Debbie would know more. We actually need to look more at things like your actual power in the muscles. Good tests are things like percentage of your fast twitch muscles and slow twitch muscles. You've got you've got a whole lot of them. You've got the level 1, 2, 3, and you get a mixture. The ideal one you want is where you've got a mixture of slow and fast, which means you've got good speed and good endurance for guys like us. So those tests, it's a question that take a little bit of muscle tissue. Sounds painful, I've never done it. And they have actually look at your muscle tissue and muscle fibers to say what type of running you are. But one of the basic tests that I would do for a lot of my elite runners is actually quite simple. And that's exactly what, very similar to what Arthur Lydiard did back in the 60s. Is I let him do a flat out 200 meter and a 400 meter on the track. And Tim Noakes concurs in that. He says you can actually judge quite accurately a runner's potential by his leg speed. I'm not talking about a sprint who's built like a bulldozer. You know, I'm talking about runners like us. I can look at your time on the 400 and your 200, and I can have a very good idea whether you'll ever be a good runner or not. Or give all things even, provided you've done the speed work, the training, etc. So I've used it extensively over the years, and it's extremely accurate. So, and then what you get around like, yeah, you know Judy Bird, some of you have heard of her. Coached her since 2002. Judy turns 59 in July. Last year still did a 39-minute 10K at the age of 58. Won the world champs as a veteran in 2003 on 10 and 21. So Judy's horrendously slow on the track. This is a bit of an anomaly here. Her flat out 400 meter, we're talking grass tracks, was 77 seconds. Now that's not quick. Most of the elite runners, ladies, are looking around about 60 to 62, or at least around about 70 seconds. So I said to Judy, well, you're slow, my darling, you know, and got a dirty look. So what we've done with Judy, she's extremely light. She races at about 49 to 50 kgs. Is we've trained her, and this is where you need to understand it's not just about these numbers. We trained her to perform right near her max. A fit runner can run at a higher intensity, maintain a higher percentage of the max. This is what you're doing as a trainer. Eileen, let's just say your max intensity that you can run on heart rate on 10Ks is 85%, okay, at the moment. We can, with training, improve it to maybe 95%. You haven't become a faster runner in terms of how quick you run the 400, but you'll be a much faster 10K runner. And that is exactly what we've done with Judy. So if I had to take Judy and I would match her with many let's just say a male runner who will run away from her on a 400 meter, but cannot stay with on a 10K. And that's because what we've done there, and I'm talking circles, and I'm coming right back to the tempo because I'm so damn clever. You'll see now. What we've done is we have to, so all the coaches have different terminology. Makes us sound clever. When I was at school, we called it stamina. Nowadays, I like to call it speed endurance, ability to maintain a fast pace. Okay, and that's exactly what tempo sessions do. It's exactly the training that you're trying to achieve by the tempo run. Okay, running a high-speed interval, sure, it helps, pushes up your VO2, helps your leg speed. But in the race, you're never going to actually be at that level. You're going to be running at that near that lactate threshold effort. So those sessions are extremely important. If I go back to Judy, on a 10:21K, we rotate her Saturdays. To give you an idea, she raced a lot of 10 and sometimes a 21. So essentially 3 weeks that we have, and this is bloody good. Let me just tell you, we have 3 weeks rotate. So the one day she has a very slow, relaxed 24 for endurance, even though she's training for 10K. The other week, she has a 15K marathon pace run, hard, steady pace run. And the third week, she has a 15K progression run, picking up the speed, getting faster and faster. Those are the 3 Saturday sessions she's been doing for years, and 2 speed sessions in the week. But those Saturday sessions are critical. Some blank faces now. Any questions? We can talk about anything you guys want. I talk too much when I start talking running, I warned you.
Neville, Natasha.
Hi, Natasha. Great, I'll see you.
Okay, look, my question is, would a club time trial, would that be equivalent of a tempo run, or is that too quick?
That's a brilliant question, Natasha. You know why? I normally tell the runners to do a tempo run, and I often let them do it on a time trial, okay? And it's a great place to do a tempo run. So running at Rose, she's still there. You can hear me, Rose? So I'm sure she can. She does Irene time. So what happens is when you go to time trial, you tend to run them too hard, okay? Flat out, every week. But now having said that, you must remember that I'm trying to protect you guys from yourselves. Doesn't mean I do what I give you, all right? Eileen, you know where I'm going with. So my best years when I ran, I did not do tempo runs. I did not do a tempo run in, I think, my first 20 years. I did maxed out runs. I did time trials every Tuesday as bloody hard as I could. And I was young and I obviously had some talent. But to give you an idea, my 8K time trial, it's a hilly route in Nelspruit. My very first time trial, I came out of the army, I was 31 minutes, 22 seconds. A year later, I was in 25:58 on the 8K, okay? We're literally, also because we didn't have races, as many races down there, we were a small town. Not like here, we had races every weekend. So I would literally sit all day on a Tuesday, get nervous and go to the toilet, working myself up and worrying about the time trial. So it is high risk, but it is also exceptionally great session to do. And sometimes I do a 4K instead of an 8K, extremely high intensity. And that is why you'll see I often use 5K time trials. Sorry, Natasha?
Our club has the 4K is the one we do. There's only like maybe 3 people that do the 8K.
Yeah.
So it's quite flat, So I was just wondering if I could use that instead of a tempo run.
You could. And what you could do then is run it harder because it's 4Ks. Okay. It won't harm you. The big thing is to make sure you warm up very well because the shorter the distance, the more you need to warm up. But you could. I would have no objections. You could actually whack that 4K. Balls to the wall. And it would be tremendous for your speed. Yeah.
Can you imagine how full those first time trials are going to be when they open again?
Oh my word. I know. They're gonna have to have a seeding system. I think, don't you?
Yeah, definitely.
I think they need a seeding system. Any comments, guys?
Neville, I think you must just cough once and everyone will run away from you, so it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think that's going to work well. Hey, that definitely.
So to make sure that I got this. So basically, we can't really, without doing like real sort of professional testing, we can't actually figure out our VO2. So all these Garmin watches and whatnot are really, it's more just like an indicator that you're getting fitter than your actual VO2.
Kerry, now unless they've come across something I don't know of, you know, I have, look, let me tell you this way. It doesn't actually matter what your VO2 number is. You know, it does decline by about 10% every 10 years as you get older. What does matter is, can you see that you're improving? And on the Garmin, I've had a lot of runners that are, when their watches is very cool, their Garmin's, I'm just using Garmin, but I think Sunto does it well. It shows they're peaking when they're in their taper phase and that the VO2 is high. Now, I don't care if that VO2 is accurate or not. The point is it's higher than it was a month ago or 2 months ago on the same device. So I'm very happy with it because I know the run is in good shape. And basically the watch is looking at things like your heart rate versus speed and things. I can't imagine how they can't measure your oxygen consumption, you know, but they can measure your heart rate. So it does work. Again, remember what I said earlier about the lactate threshold? It's a misnomer, but we use it because at that level works. So the Garmin stuff does work, does seem to, my runners do run well when it shows they've tapered well and that their VO2 is going up. So I wouldn't completely trash it. I'm just not sure how they actually work it out.
Can I just say something about that? Yesterday, Garmin told me that my training is unproductive.
Oh my word.
And my yeah. Today, I'm peaking and my VO2 is less.
Okay. So if it, Kirsty, if it said that, it probably was saying that you're tired yesterday. And I don't know if you were.
No, yeah. So, but my point is that I don't know if you can trust the watch. You can't trust the watch.
You know, at the end of the day, I'm old school, you know, and you'll see that. I still try and teach my runners to run on perceived effort. And I must just tell, engineers are the worst people to coach, my God. Because they are so analytic and they want to analyze everything. And I keep trying to, Robert, sorry, are you an engineer?
No, I'm not.
I see you laughing.
I'm an abalone farmer.
but they're extremely analytic and it can drive me nuts because you need to learn to listen to your body. And if you're feeling good, you're feeling good. If you're feeling bad, you're feeling bad. And the problem with the thing like the heart rate, which is now again will be linked if you're running heart rate on your watch, is we're saying that if your heart rate is low when you're running, if it doesn't go up high, you're having an easy run. Correct. We all agree. That, Darcy, he's nodding. Okay. But that's also a load of rubbish, maybe. If you are very tired, you can't run hard enough to push your heart rate up. So you actually shouldn't be running, maybe you should have been resting. You can feel your legs are trash. Eh? Your heart rate is nice and low, but it's actually because you haven't got the energy to push yourself hard enough to get the heart rate up. So heart rate can be very misleading as well. And so any gadget is nice, but you must know when to overrule it and when to look at it. And so use it, but don't let it rule you, you know.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me because I'll never forget, I did so much research on heart rates and stuff like about 3 years back, and I read like everything I could because I thought I wanted to start training according to heart rates, and I could not get my heart rate up to save my life, and I was literally dying. Like, I just felt like I was going to collapse.
Did you feel tired in that time?
Yeah, exhausted. And so I just gave up after the first run. I thought, I'll never hit like 100 and whatever I need to hit.
I must also, Kerry, I must also tell you guys, you must remember, one of the worst, most dangerous things, I actually get so angry. It started with polo. Have you ever heard of this? To get your max heart rate, you use 220 minus your age.
Yes.
I see some heads nodding. Okay, it's a load of crap again as well. So your max heart rate varies from person to person. In fact, I was chatting, I think it was to Brendan, Andre, I think it was to Brendan. My heart rate, I'm 58. Brendan's a lot younger than Andre. How old is Brendan?
He's turning 28 next
Okay.
month, I think.
All right, so his max heart rate is only about 3 beats more than mine. To give you an idea, I can push my heart rate up to 184 at the moment at the age of 58. Theoretically, I should be dropping dead. Okay, so your max heart rate is genetic. It varies a lot from person to. I had a runner, Greg Barnes. As a veteran, he ran a 608, oh sorry, a 610 comrades, 228 marathon, and so on. And his max heart rate was around about 166. Now you can imagine if I tried to use this, what would happen? I would give him a session that he actually just couldn't get his, it would be beyond him, you know. But if I used that for myself, I'd never train hard. I'd basically be cruising. So if you want to do, if you do want to use heart rate, first before you do, worry, if you have run the heart rate for years, you already have a very good idea of what your heart rate is when you're comfortable or when you're working hard, right? So that's correct. But if you really, really want to use it properly, you need to test your max heart rate and your minimum heart rate. And the only way to test your max is you need to run hard to max effort. And I can explain it to anybody who wants to do it. And that will change depending on your level of fitness, on your age, etc. And then your minimum heart rate is when you wake up first thing in the morning. Okay. Now, what you want, the difference between your max heart rate and the minimum is what we call a working heart rate range. Okay. The wider your working heart rate range, the better. So what you want ideally is a very high max and a very low minimum if you want to be a really good runner. So just I talk a lot about myself, but in my 20s, I had an army camper that tried to send me home. And till they heard I was a runner, because my resting heart rate was 31, 32 back then in the day, not when I woke up. And then my max, I would do intervals at about 220. So I had a massive working range, which is, as I got older, it's decreased. My resting heart rate, and I hate to say it, is about 50. Well, I haven't really tested it early in the morning because I'm too lazy. But so as you get older, I'm getting off it now a little bit, but as you get older, you want to know why we slow down as we get older. I know you all want to know this question. Hey? Nobody? Okay. Anybody want to know?
Yes, me.
Ah, there you go, Natasha. Andre. Okay, so the reason is it's not all in the mind, okay? That's also a load of rubbish. As a coach, I hate it when people say things, everything is just in the mind. You've got to look at the reasons. And there are two main reasons for it, actually three. The first one is the higher your heart rate, the more blood you're pumping, the higher the VO2. We spoke about that earlier. That makes sense. Eh? You want to get as much oxygen through your system as you can. Okay, it's one of the reasons why when we're running at the sea level, we run better. Okay, so your max heart rate declines by about 10% every decade. So I can hit 184, which is extremely high for my age, but still nowhere near my 220 that I could do 30 years ago. So even at my max now, I cannot push as much oxygen, blood with oxygen through my system that I did when I was young. Doesn't matter what I do or how fit I am. Okay. The second reason is we lose connectivity in our muscles and our tendons, ligaments, and when you think about what gives us that propelling force when we run, it's things like our Achilles tendons. That's what propels. That's why plyometrics and stuff we've been doing with Debbie is very good. So we lose that powerful thrust, basically, that we had 20 years ago. And what I can say is, which is interesting now, I'm a cyclist now. I wear nice tights and stuff. And it's interesting because in the 2 weeks with Debbie's sessions, what we call the functional threshold power, it's watts, basically how much power you can put out on the bike, has jumped by 30 watts in 2 weeks. So my watts per kilogram jumped from 3.5 to 4. So now suddenly I know if I get in a race of the Masters, I'm actually going to be in the front. And that's been 2 weeks, and I actually think it's been due to the work with Debbie, where I've increased my explosive power in my quads, my glutes, etc., etc. So that's one of the areas you can work on as we get older. Then the third one is we lose our flexibility. So you can think about it. I often, in an email I sent last week, I was saying what the guys can do in the first week. A lot of the people haven't done a lot of fast running. You start adding what we call strides, fast bursts in the runs. And why do I say that? One of the reasons is when you do a lot of slow running, which is garden running was mostly, even Debbie, you couldn't get a good speed going on the garden. Eh? Deb, you never got to 3.5 minutes, okay, did you? No, okay. So you lose your flexibility. Your range of motion in your muscles becomes less and less. This typically happens also to people who do ultras, training for comrades. Your legs tighten up. So you need a very good stretching regime that you can use regularly to keep the flexibility. So if you can do some strength training, do the flexibility, using things as well as massage helps flexibility. We can't do a hell of a lot about our max heart rate, other than staying healthy, low cholesterol, etc., but that will help you to maintain your speed as you get older. So I'm talking circles, I know, but does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So yeah, so if somebody says to you it's all in the mind, we're getting older, it's not. The guys do run better than we expect, but it's because we've improved our training methods as well. Hi. Somebody was going to say something. I was going to quick look at the chats here. Is anybody asking questions here? Valana, how to max heart rate? There are two methods that I would normally use. Okay, and an interesting one. I had Dustin do it on the indoor trainer bike for fun last week. He wanted to see what his max was. So you can't do it on the first session. You can do one of the options. You do intervals. So typically for a runner, you do say 5 times 400s, because you won't hit your max on your first heart rate. If you look at I did 5 times 5 minutes on the bike yesterday with 5-minute recoveries. It's one of the pre-planned sessions on the bike. And on the bike, my heart rate is lower than when I run. Okay, you guys all know that, eh? And on that particular session, it's just above threshold, so I don't hit max, okay? But if you look at my heart rate, it's a perfect linear line going like that from start to finish. So basically what happens is at the end of the first 5 minutes, I went up to about 140, and then my recovery, I went down to about 100. I was feeling very good yesterday. I'd come off a 3-day rest. Then I went up to about 145 and came down. Eventually, by the last one, I was on 165 and I came down to about 130. So it was a gradual linear progression. If I had, on the last one, put in a max sprint, I would have hit my max heart rate. So if you're running, say, you could try it on 400s. Do 3 400s, all high intensity with your normal recoveries. Then on the last one, you run it at a sort of normal intensity. You don't want to be maxed out. Remember what I said, if your legs are too tired, you can't push your heart rate up. You want to have some energy. Then as you go into that last 150 meters, you start to wind up the pace. You crank it up and you crank it up, so that you hit your max speed in that last 100 meters. Now remember, you can only hold your max speed for about, I'm not a sprinter, but maybe 20, 30 meters. Remember, any run on 100 meters, a 100-meter sprinter is slowing down in the last 50 meters. Okay? And when you look at your watch, somewhere in that last 100-meter sprint, you'll probably hit your max. The other options, you go and do a 5K time trial or a park run. It's a good, hard, steady effort. But you know, normally at the end, you're not so whacked that you can't sprint. Am I right, Eileen? See you nodding there, hey, Amy? Fran, you'll know. Fran, you end up with a sprint on them, eh? End of the park run. So that's where you could test your max heart rate. You go into that last kilometer and you start winding it up. Last 100 meter, you are sprinting max effort. You will probably hit your max heart rate. Alana, does that help?
Yeah, I don't know. When we do fartlek runs or your hill training, my heart rate can go to 218. And then it comes down very quickly. Yes, it's like, what? And then I remember you said you're ready to go at 120 again, but it comes down so quickly. Like when I look at it again, it's like 90. And then I thought, okay, when I can go again, although I feel tired.
That is,
I got to the point.
That is extremely hard. Look, how old are you? 16?
40.
Okay. That's extremely high. Most
That's
runners
why
in the
I'm
20s.
asking. It's like,
Most runners
like
in the,
my heart rate now is on 228, 216. It's quickly, very quickly.
what,
But saying that, and this is what I want to ask you, because I was worried about it. We did a red blood test just before Skyrun, and mine was actually the highest because I train at altitude all the time. Can that be a reason?
Okay.
My red blood cells are higher.
Are high. So your hematocrit is very high, probably. Much like the cyclist or the EPO. Quite possibly.
Whatever that is.
Yeah. I would say it's extremely high. I have had runners, I think D, are you still here? D still here? She may have gone. D also had extremely high heart rate, Max. And she went and had, Eileen, I think you had as well, hey?
Yeah, so what I did is I've always had a high heart rate, and I couldn't understand after a year of running why my average heart rate was around 170. So I thought, well, is there potentially a problem? So I went to see a cardiologist, and I told him my whole story, and I've been trying to do this heart rate zone running, you know, your target heart rate. And he just started laughing at me. And he picks out his phone and he shows me his running stats, and his average heart rate was 180 and he's 44. And he said to me, all of this stuff about trying to run within target heart rate zones is a lot of rubbish. As you were saying, Neville, that each person has their own maximum heart rate, and it's around the range, and he's between your minimum heart rate, your max heart rate. And he said, what the most important thing is to assess is how quickly that heart rate comes down. So he said, it's absolutely fine if you're running your 21Ks at an average of 170 beats per minute, because for the life of me, I could never get my heart rate down to 140. It just never gets there. I can't get it down there unless I'm walking. And he said, that's just the way your heart is. But what was more important to him is how quickly that heart rate comes down and what your resting heart rate is. He says the heart is a very efficient muscle, and he says it's different for every person, and it's all around your perceived effort, and you'll know when you're tired and when you need to slow down. And he said the worst bunch of people to deal with are cyclists. Sorry, Neville.
Yeah.
He said because they want to analyze every single piece of data. Yeah. And he's told all of them, just chuck your watches away. It's really not helping you. Rather listen to your body, and this is from a cardiologist, and assess your perceived effort.
I agree with him totally. No, so it's what I'm coming back to talking about the perceived effort. If you feel, Valana, your heart rate comes down very quickly and you feel completely recovered, then you're not doing damage, then you're fine. If your heart rate really was too high, you wouldn't come down that mountain, my girl. You'd still be up there. So I think
I remember when I started with you in January and I had to do hill training. By the time I get to the bottom of the hill, I was like still on 160, and I thought, okay, well, I thought, okay, I think my watch is telling me I'm having a heart attack, but now it's fine. It's like 90 or 100, and also I feel comfy. I can do a 20 or 21 at 140 or around there, between 121.
But what I must maybe...
I'm actually at a nice pace.
Yeah. What I
must just actually enjoy it.
Yeah. What I must just mention is, remember, heart rate, hill repeats and stuff aren't supposed to be max effort, that you fall on your knees at the top. They're controlled hard efforts, okay? You're not maxed out 100%. In fact, you're not maxed out 100% on any speed session unless you're doing a 200-meter interval. So on a hill, you're working hard, but now when you get to the top, if you collapse on your knees, you're probably running in too hard, you know. But your fast recovery, that, as Eileen said, that's really the thing that we measure. And again, the fitter runner becomes the quicker your recovery as well.
Okay, that makes sense.
Great question, Valana. Anybody else here? Anybody with kids worrying about the school kids? Because I don't. Everybody looks happy. Oh, that's good.
I'm very jealous. Everyone who's got live-in nannies that have returned.
Now I've had a lot of runners on WhatsApp telling me stressing about the kids and the whole school thing and how confusing it is, you know.
Yeah.
So it sounds quite hectic.
Coach, I just want to ask one thing.
Oh.
Do you ever look at leg cadence?
Yeah,
Like
good question.
The cadence with tempos and everything. And do we work on that or what?
Yeah, listen, it's a very good question, Debs. What I do often when I do these talks or trail clinics, that people ask me, can I change running style in the broader picture? Okay, I tell them I can't. It's very, very hard to change your running style. Everybody seems to be very focused on their running style. Your running style is determined by biomechanics. So there's a reason why you might run with one arm slightly held higher than the other. And if you don't get injured, that's fine. If you try to change it, you're going to upset something else and get injured elsewhere. So I would say only change running style if you're very, very prone to injuries. And then to do that, you need to do something like go to Pinnacle Health. I got an arrangement with them for a 10% discount for my runner, where they'll do a gait analysis and put you on a treadmill, video you, and look at it slow-mo and say, the reason you do this or do that is because of that. And then you need to work on changing that particular problem. Any of you remember Paula Radcliffe, former world record holder for years? She ran like a bloody horse with the head going back and front. I mean, every time I see her, I want to restrain her. But she ran a 2:15 marathon and did high mileage for many years. So coming back to the cadence is the one thing we can change, though, Debbie. That's about the one thing that I will say. Now, you may have heard of the figure of 180. See any nods here? Okay. So where this 180 cadence comes from, it's actually 90 per leg. All right. Just don't go try to do 180 per leg. Or if you do, video it for me. I'd like to see it. Where it comes from is the coach Jack Daniels, not the drink, Rieta. I can see your eyes from all day. He's a world-class running coach. And what he did at the 84 Olympics, this is really anal, I know. He and his wife sat with video cameras, and they videoed every race virtually from the 100 meters up to the marathon to look at cadence. And what they found was very interesting. All the runners from 5,000 meter up had the same cadence. Now, if you think about it, and it happened to be around about 180, the ladies might be slightly slower, but not usually. Now, if you think about it, it doesn't really make sense, does it? Because a 5,000 meter runner is running at maybe 240 a K, and a marathon runner is running at about maybe 305 a K on Olympics. But they're running with the same cadence. Now, I remember when I was in my early 80s, if I saw a pretty girl in the street, I tried to lengthen my stride because I thought I looked cool and fast, you know. Probably looked like a giraffe. But if you think about it, there are two ways of physically running faster. Anyone want to guess at the two? Let's hear you guys. Two ways. Not training, start. Two ways.
Stretching your stride.
Increasing stride, that's the one. And increasing cadence, those two. Okay. So you can either do one or the other or both. All right. Now, there was a guy, a Negro, at the London 1948 game, Arthur Wint. I do this trick at all my clinics. I get a 6-foot guy to lie down on the ground. Then I say, I want you a guy to run, step off where the guy's head is, and then we measure where this person runs, where his strides are. And invariably they do about 2 strides. That land, you know, 1 foot would land perhaps round about where the guy's waist is, and the next one where his feet is. Now, Arthur Wint, he was an 800-meter specialist, won the Olympic gold medal. It's a long time ago, but I love my history. But listen to this, his stride length, 6 feet. But now, not 6 feet slow, 6 feet high cadence. Now, to do that, you need huge mobility, flexibility, and strength. Can you imagine maintaining that sort of stride length? He was a tall guy, but still, imagine maintaining that. Now, the problem is when you do a longer race like a marathon, it'd be extremely fatiguing. None of our elite marathoners have the strength to have a long stride length for 42 Ks. But they can have the right cadence. And what they found is when you run around about 180, seems to be the optimum, where you're running economically, saving. Remember, one of the limiting things in a long race is basically how economical can you run. It's not just economical as in burning fuel, but how much oxygen you use. If you can burn less oxygen, you can run faster at the same effort. And around about 180, people are more economical. And it's generally, most runners are slower than that. Particularly longer runners, if John was still here, we tend to try to lengthen our strides. I've seen it if you go and watch a track meet of university students. I still love this. Go watch all the pretty girls running. Invariably, if they're doing a 1500 meter, remember these aren't all well-trained athletes, what we would call top-class athletes. They're students who have some talent. If you watch them by the third lap, the cadence is slowed and they're trying to make up for it by expanding their stride length. And they're actually, when that happens, you know what happens? You actually start landing behind your center of gravity. You're behind your foot when it lands. Robert, you with me there? I can see you thinking about it.
Yes, I was just thinking about it,
yeah. So if you're over your foot, you're over your center of gravity. If you're behind it when you land, that's heels, it becomes a heel strike. All right. So when that happens, you're actually braking. You have to, you're like a fulcrum. You have to push your body over your foot, which takes power. So they actually are having to use more energy to keep moving. But they do it instinctively. But if they instead to do a higher cadence, all you need to do is shorten your stride by a centimeter or so. That's all you do. And immediately your cadence will pick up and you're running more efficiently and you'll maintain the speed. So,
sorry, Neville, is that why they say for hill training, things like that improves form, things like that?
Yes and no.
That in relation to cadence?
You know why hill training improves form? It's because you normally have a higher knee lift. And when you think about it, when you're running fast, one of the determinants is you need to have a high knee lift to run fast. And if you go back to Arthur Letty in the 80s, very interesting, he used to have a transition phase after the base training, before the speed, before they did proper heel work. And he called it bounding. Don't know if you guys have heard this session. Fascinating. What he's basically saying is you need to improve the muscle strength and form. And the easiest way, because and now we can do it with Debbie sessions, etc., okay? They didn't have the facilities. If you do exaggerated arm drive and high knee lift up a hill, which means you're not running as fast as you normally would. You're working more on form. Now, remember, a lot of he had marathon runners, but a lot of his runners were guys like Peter Snell. Now, an interesting sort of character, because after 4 years he retired because he got bored of winning. He lost 2 races in 4 years, won 3 Olympic titles and 4 world records, 800 meters and 1500. Then he got tired of winning, he got a bit boring. Okay, they would do this session bounding. So they would push up. It's a plyometric exercise. It's a bit like when Debbie killed us doing burpees and you have to jump in the air. But it's a similar principle. It's a similar principle. You're increasing the power and the plyometric. And he was doing that in a natural way. But if you're scuttling up the hill, and Judy threw a tantrum when we had a braai about a year ago, and Greg was there. Judy scuttled along the road. She's become so damn efficient that she does not even, I swear, doesn't even lift her legs. And Greg said, she said, you scuttle across the road like a bug. Oh my word, didn't go down well. So Judy would benefit. And in fact, she is doing 2 plyometric classes a week at the moment, because I've said to her, we need to improve, especially as she's older, improve on that. Does that help, Robert?
Yes, no, it does. Yeah, so thank you.
Super. So what you do, Debs, when you test the 90, it's quite simple. You just run, set your watch, and then count your one leg for a minute, times it by 2, and just see how far. Normally, I normally have about 30 people in a trail clinic class. Normally, about 8 to 10 will be correct, 2 or 3 will be quicker, and all the rest are slower.
Okay.
Right, to give you an idea of it.
Awesome.
But that is the benefits of landing when you start doing a high cadence, is you also start landing on your midfoot, not on your heel, which means more power. The drawback is it can be hard on your calves and your Achilles, but this is exceptionally important. Why I keep talking about trail clinic. It's exceptionally important on trails, because you need, on a trail, you need to land on your midfoot. Because if you land on a rock or a stone that rolls, you can carry on, you won't fall. But if you land on your heel and you're behind your center of gravity, you're going to fall. So this is something I teach, particularly trail runners. But Greg Barnes that I mentioned earlier, we worked on his cadence. He had a very slow cadence. He's actually quite a fast cadence now. And I mean, he ran a 31:58, 10K as a veteran, with a shorter stride than I would normally say is good, but a very good cadence. So definitely, it's a fun thing you can work on and use as well. Any questions, guys? This has been great. I'm thinking another hot chocolate for me. Philip, you're right there.
Yeah, all good.
You're all good.
Very
Great.
interesting, yes.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. What we'll do is, if you guys like this session, we can have it weekly and we can vary the questions. We can chat about anything. I enjoy, as you see, I normally have coffee for an hour, and you know me, I love talking running. So this is a great way to do it. But
lots of birds with one stone.
Sorry, say again?
I said, it's Amy. I said lots of birds with one stone instead of meeting us all individually for coffee.
Is that? But you know, it's great. And you know what's also nice is Balana pops up with a question, and then Eileen has had a similar experience.
Yeah.
And has spoken to cardio. You know, instead of me now saying to Balana, and we had the same actually with Dee that you saw earlier. Very similar, same as Eileen, and she also went to cardio. Also was tested, also told she's fine. Both of them.
Yeah, I also went to a cardiologist, by the way, because my heart also does funny things, and it's 100% normal. So I think a lot of us have had that.
Yeah, but having said
that, my resting heart rate is also extremely low, and then when I run, it starts off very, very high, and then comes down and kind of settles around 140.
You know what I do say is we don't mess with the heart and take chances. You remember Jan Stein, who passed away from heart attack on the first Sunday of our lockdown? Very, very fit, great, lean guy. Rieta ran with him. She knows him. Debbie knows him, ran with him. And he did the Dahlstrom run, did Commerce last year, Dahlstrom run, strong. Absolutely, completely unexpected. I think it was 52. The last person you'd expect. I don't know if it was genetic. So if you ever are in any doubts, I always do. I've gone as well. I've also gone and had gone to the cardiologist and stuff like that. If you have any doubts or any worries, don't ignore it. Rather go and have it checked, even if it's only for peace of mind. But, you know, it's while most of us are fine. I don't know what happened with Jan, but that night he wasn't. And I had a runner who also died of a heart attack 2 years ago. 26 years old. Did the Sky Run, 65K. Did Manweni run with me as a training run with a group of mine. And was feeling really, really bad. It was weird because she'd had a bad spider bite. And was very, very sick for about 3 weeks. Just started running again, and then she was feeling sick. And she told me the Monday morning, she was obviously not running then. Told me the Monday morning she's feeling so bad. That night she had a heart attack and died. And she was 26. So we can't underestimate it. Don't take chances. Rather go and have it checked if you've got any concerns. Yeah. Well, we could talk like this. I'm not a cardiologist. You know. So let's not ever take chances with that. But by and large, we are healthier than the general population. None of us are going to get the COVID-19 virus. Okay.
Yes.
I'm starting. I wish I could just get it and get it done with, so I can then go out and socialize.
Yeah.
If you don't know whether you can get it again.
Thanks, guys. And if there are no more questions, I'll put this out to the group now. And been super. Lovely chatting to you guys.
Thanks so much, Neville.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. See you guys.